Welcome to the Joe Cohen Show. Join me as I share my experience with biohacking and invite top health experts to explore the latest technology, supplements, research, and resources for optimizing your body and brain. Hey everyone, in this podcast, I'm going to be talking about methylation. There's a lot of information about methylation. I think a lot of it is garbage. And we're going to be talking about how to test whether you're an over-methylator, maybe an under-methylator, and what do you do about it? So if you're not methylating well enough, what do you do about it? And so we're going to go through the recommendations and everything you need to know about methylation. This is going to include a little bit about MTHFR, but it's not going to be mainly about MTHFR, just to have you understand that. So I'm going to share my screen for people who want to follow. And essentially, the basic test, there's a few tests that you can do to check methylation. One is a genetic test, and it could give you your predisposition to whether you're an undermethylator or not. And then you could do lab tests, which you can verify using a bunch of different lab markers. I'm going to share my screen now. So if you're using self-decode, which of course is the only genetic test that I recommend, you're basically going to search for methylation and you're going to come up with different reports related to methylation. This is the main one that's called methylation. You could see that I am lower in methylation, and it gives you different information about methylation. Gives you some charts. You could see methylation. There's a lot of genetic variants that are related to it, and you could see how if you're looking. Now, we're going to go to the lab tests that are relevant to methylation, and I recommend doing that before you really take any kind of treatment protocol or follow any recommendations. So there are some basic labs that I recommend checking for. There's some more advanced ones. For example, it's the SAM to SAH sol ratio. That's, I'd say, a more advanced one. But the more basic ones that are pretty widely available is serum folate, homocysteine, serum B6, serum B12. So these are serum B12 and serum folate are commonly tested by your doctor, and then homocysteine as well. You're usually going to request that, but they'll usually test that, and sometimes not, depending on your doctor. And then some slightly more advanced ones could be methionine and B6. So you need enough methionine in order to create SAMe, and B6 also helps as part of methylation in various ways, including lowering homocysteine. I'd say the single best one is looking at your homocysteine, and you could also look at your genetic result, which will give you some kind of indication as well. Sometimes you might be genetically fine with methylation, but you could still have high homocysteine because there's things that increase homocysteine that we will discuss. And so even if you're genetically okay, you could still need more methyl groups. Now, we have 28 recommendations for methylation, and I'm going to go through each one, describing how they could help. And they're ordered based on the priority for my personal genetics. And the first one is going to be methylfolate. So you're going to see methylfolate is important for methylation. With B12, it helps convert homocysteine to methionine. And so it's quite an important nutrient for methylation. And you could see also that it says I have the MTHFR variant. I have an increased need for folate, which means that I want to get more folate in my diet. I also have a PEMT gene variant linked to high homocysteine levels and in people with reduced folate intake. So again, these two genetic variants actually make it more likely that make it more important for me to get adequate levels of folate and even a bit more folate. So I do supplement with methylfolate. And then there's vitamin B12. So if you're going to supplement with methylfolate, you need to take B12 as well. And they work together In my case, it says I have a genetic variant MTRR that may be linked to impaired methylation and higher homocysteine levels. Vitamin B12 is essential for MTRR enzyme function. The effects of this variant on homocysteine may be stronger in people with low vitamin B12 levels. You could see the recommendations are also taking into account these genetic variations, and you could see more why these genetic variations are having an impact. Next up is trimethylglycine, also known as TMG or betaine. And this is something that you can take. So you can also look at the genetic variants here. There's a couple genetic variants that are related to it, PEMT, MTHFR again, but also a BHMT enzyme. And I have a BHMT enzyme that may be linked to impaired methylation, higher homocysteine, and people with this variant may benefit from increasing betaine intake. So that's another recommendation. And by the way, all of the recommendations that I mentioned here, I do myself. So I take a methylfolate, I take vitamin B12, and I take betaine. The amount of methylfolate, I'll go through the dosing that I take personally. I take around 2 milligrams methylfolate, which is higher than most people need. I would generally recommend about 1 milligram, and I take about a half a milligram of B12 methylcobalamin, and I think that's pretty decent dosage. And then I take about 3 to 4 grams of trimethylglycine, and that is enough. That's a pretty good amount. You don't generally want to take more than 4 grams a day long term. Then number 4 is limiting alcohol intake. So alcohol actually depletes a bunch of B vitamins, including B1, folate. It also depletes choline, so increases the risk of choline deficiency, and it can worsen your genetics by blocking MTR and PEMT. So it seems like I have two gene variants. One is PMT and MTHFD1 that is linked to choline deficiency, and these alcohol can potentially exacerbate the effects of these genetic variants. Next up, we have dietary choline. There's two really major sources of dietary choline, and the major sources of dietary choline are going to be liver and eggs. If you're not getting any of those foods, it's generally going to be hard to get enough dietary choline. Eggs and liver by far have the most choline out of any food. Beef liver has more. Chicken liver also has quite a lot. So choline is important because it converts to betaine, which is important as well. And then if you're not getting enough choline, then you're not going to have enough betaine. And if if you need more methyl groups, your body can be converting more choline into betaine, and then you'll be deficient in choline for other uses. So you want to make sure you're getting enough choline as well in your diet. I don't think you need to supplement with choline if you have methylation issues. And it also depends on the individual. So what I do is I take a supplement and I'll measure my homocysteine levels to see if I'm in the normal range. And I keep doing that to make sure until I get in the normal range and increase the number of supplements I'm taking or increase the dosage until I get in the optimal range. And the optimal ranges for homocysteine are on the site and for all of the lab results. And so you could see for us, it's 5 to 9 and above. The last one I did was 10.2. That was the last test I did. And so you want to make sure that you're in the optimal range. Now, you know, you have to look at also what your level of B vitamins are. So for folate, in this case, I wasn't taking as much folate in the last blood test, but still it's 15.7, which is a good number. But if I take more than 2.5 milligrams a day, I'm already getting above 23, it's something that's not tested as what happens if your levels are super high long term. I like to keep it, we have the optimal range here, 11 to 22.6. And so that's what I recommend. You could have it on the higher end, but you don't want to go too high with any nutrient. And so you want to check your blood levels. when you're supplementing. And I maxed out my B12. I maxed out my folate when again, this particular test, I wasn't taking the full levels of folate. I think it was only taking a half a milligram or something like that, maybe a milligram. But yeah, at 2 milligrams, 2.5 milligrams, I max out the folate, meaning my folate levels are on the high, normal, optimal end of the range. And so that's okay. That I don't need more of that. The B6 I generally maxed out. In this case, this is the only case that it's on the lower end of the optimal range. And the reason is because of supplementing with histidine. But I guarantee that if I recheck it, it's probably going to be normal. It's usually actually on the higher end, higher than the optimal range. And so I didn't want to go overboard. So that's another one that I'm going to recheck. But essentially, at a certain point, it's like I'm maxing out the effects that I'm going to get from folate, B6, and B12. And you want to do other things. So that's where TMG comes in. And this is with TMG, but it's only 2 grams. So that's why I'm taking now more grams, 3 to 4, and seeing how that is going to do. I also added another supplement, which I'll be talking about a little later. But essentially, the approach is that you want to follow the homocysteine. And if we look at my homocysteine levels over time, this is a very interesting thing. So one of the things I noticed, I was checking homocysteine for a long time, and I always knew about homocysteine. And the first time I got it checked and saved was in 2012, mid 2012, and it was 8.8, and the numbers at the lowest point it was 6.8 in 2018. And in 2018, I wasn't really exercising very much, if at all. Like it was pretty minimum. And so that's one of the things I realized, that I used to not exercise as much as I do now. Once I started exercising more, I put much greater demands on my methylation. And if I got an infection, you also see my homocysteine went up quite a bit. So that tells me that either exercising or getting sick or any kind of stressors on the body, I've been putting a lot more stressors on my body in the past few years, generally healthy stressors. So that's a good thing. But you still see that it raises the homocysteine, and so you have to make sure you're getting enough methyl groups there. So let's go through some more of these recommendations. Dietary choline. I used to be allergic to eggs. I'm not really allergic anymore. I think I was able to fix that food sensitivity or allergy 80 to 90%, but it's still hard for me to know if I got rid of it 100%. So that means that my main source of dietary choline is liver, chicken liver. There's a dietary folate. I do eat vegetables, so you get it generally from vegetables, especially leafy green vegetables. So I do get some dietary folate as well. But if I get if I eat too many vegetables, too much vegetables, then I get bloated. And so I max that out as well. Next up is methyl sulfonyl. So the methyl sulfonyl is something that has been new in my regimen. And this came on my radar in, I guess, in a couple different ways, but essentially one of them was to increase methylation to get my homocysteine down. Again, I maxed out some of the other methyl groups, and also because I saw I was low on methionine and cysteine, and so I thought maybe I needed more sulfur, and this is the perfect thing for that. Sulfur plus methyl groups. And it turned out that it was really good for me. I feel really good on it. It makes my exercise recovery much better, and I feel really great on it. So whether that's from the methyl groups or the sulfur, I think it's probably more from the sulfur, but I think the methyl groups help as well. And I'm assuming that my homocysteine is going to be lower with this supplementation. And again, this also has its limits, but when you look at the studies, they're generally looking at 4 grams a day. Same with not more than 4 grams a day. Same with the betaine. So you just, I just don't want to do significantly more than what most of the studies are doing in terms of the betaine and doing it long term. So I think a reasonable safe dosage is about 4 grams or less. And so I take about 4 grams, and same with the trimethylglycine. or betaine. And then there's the choline supplements. I do take a choline supplement, and this is with the choline supplement, my homocysteine was still suboptimal, and I take it in the form of lecithin, which has the phosphatidylcholine, and you could see that I have that PEMT gene variant, which makes me need choline even more because you see that my genetics shows that I'm low on methylation. My homocysteine corroborates it. And again, if I don't exercise and I take methylfolate and a bunch of supplements, methyl supplements, B12, then my homocysteine will be in a good level. The problem is it's very healthy to exercise. So there's always trade-offs to everything that you're doing, even exercise. There's some negatives. Yes, you can get injured, but there's many positives. And it's something that I feel like I need to do to be optimally healthy, yet I don't want to have the negatives, which is the higher homocysteine, just not enough methylation. Next up, we have the vitamin B12, and I have a MTRR gene variant linked to impaired methylation. And the vitamin B12 is an essential cofactor for that enzyme. And I do well, by the way, with all of these methyl supplements, which also means that I'm more likely to need them. If the way that you know if you're doing well with something is you're looking at your genetics, you look at your homocysteine, you look at how you feel, and you could also look at, like I said, the other tests, like methionine could be a decent indicator, for example, because if you're methylating well, then you're going to take the homocysteine and create methionine with that. So your methionine levels are going to be higher. This is a little tricky. This is, I would say, is a more advanced one. This is going to give you methyl groups, but I would only supplement with this if you're low in methionine, because this is also going to increase methionine. And yeah, so I would recommend only supplementing with it if you check your methionine levels. Now, it is, if you have this PEMT gene variant, SAMe is even more important because it helps the enzyme function by supplying methyl groups. But at the end of the day, like I said, so you can look for that gene variant, but also I would make sure that it's a tricky supplement, right? It's not something that you would just take randomly. Optimize sleep. So we're going to go through some things that might be obvious to a lot of people, but we need to make sure that you understand how they interact with methylation. So the way that sleep interacts with methylation, sleep is a time for the body to repair and regenerate. During sleep, methylation processes are involved in cell repair and maintenance of DNA integrity. And so getting sleep ensures the process occurs efficiently. Essentially, sleep works hand in hand with methylation to do a bunch of great stuff for the body. And if you're not sleeping well and you're not methylating well, the combination could be quite destructive. Stress hormone regulation. So, sleep helps regulate cortisol, and cortisol and stress are known to affect DNA methylation. Detoxification. Sleep aids in the body, they aid in the body's detoxification, and that's partly mediated by methylation. So, like I said, they go hand in hand to help you detox from different toxins. Exercise. Now, as I mentioned before, too much exercise is also a problem. Too little exercise is a problem. And so you want to optimize the exercise level. That's why we don't say increase or decrease, right? Exercise is very good. But you should know that excess exercise, and excess is a general term, but it increases the methylation demand through several mechanisms. Again, I experienced this firsthand, but there's also very clear mechanisms. So when you increase energy metabolism, you also increase methylation reactions in the body for energy production, repair, and recovery. DNA methylation changes. Exercise can induce alterations in DNA methylation patterns, particularly genes involved in muscle growth, energy metabolism, and inflammation. And these are how the body has their epigenetic changes in order to adapt to exercise. Stress, exercise, Especially intense physical exercise is a form of stress that can temporarily increase oxidative stress and inflammation. The body responds to this by upregulating methylation processes to manage and counteract these effects. So, this is again a similar when you get sick. The reason why your homocysteine can go up again is because of oxidative stress, inflammation. Your body is utilizing a lot of resources, and so you need more of these methyl groups. And that's why also when I get sick, all of my B vitamins tank because they're using they're needed for methylation processes in the body. Muscle repair and growth, exercise induced muscle damage, and subsequent repair processes involve methylation for protein synthesis and tissue remodeling. Avoiding cigarette smoke, I don't really need to go through that, but cigarettes have a lot of problems with regard to methylation, including depleting folate, including increasing oxidative stress, and including a whole bunch of other things. So that is something that you want to stay away from. B6, so B6, first of all, should be taken in combination with folate and B12. So should B2, so should B1, so should B3. Basically, all the B vitamins work well together. So that's why I always recommend taking a B complex. But this is going through the individual B vitamins to show you what the specific ones are needed. And so the B6 is important for methylation. It takes the homocysteine and converts it to cysteine, which is important for glutathione production. So that is important. Dietary magnesium. So either dietary or supplemental magnesium. There's a certain genetic variant, MTHFD1, that magnesium could potentially help with. But there's a bunch of enzymes that magnesium is important for the methylation processes, and getting adequate levels of magnesium is important. That is something you can also test for in the blood. Zinc as well. So, zinc is important for folate absorption and healthy methylation. So, it helps folate carry out various roles in the body and helps absorb folate as well. Avoiding exposure to heavy metals. So, various heavy metals can increase the methylation demand, including mercury and arsenic, which the body methylates, and that helps facilitate their excretion. Avoiding high dose niacin. Niacin sucks up the methyl groups, and it could deplete methyl donors like SAMe. That was probably another reason why my homocysteine was going up a little bit, because I was taking a fair dosage of niacin. Now, I thought that I was counteracting it more than enough with the TMG, but you still have to look at the final results. So I think it's a combination because, again, my homocysteine was still starting to go up even before I started taking niacin, but that didn't really help the situation. Beetroots have the trimethylglycine, so if you want a natural approach to getting some trimethylglycine, you can also eat beetroot. Yoga is yoga goes hand in hand with stress reduction. Essentially, stress can cause problems with methylation. You also need more methyl groups when you're stressed. So there's, like I said, if you're stressing your body or you're stressing your mind or any kind of stress, really, you're taking up methyl groups. So my hunch is that people who are suited for marathons, they're probably naturally they have a tendency to be high methylators because I think that if they were low methylators, they would be causing too many problems with their body or they're supplementing. Creatine. The body uses quite a lot of resources in terms of methylation to create creatine. So if you take creatine, you could potentially decrease the methyl demand for creating it, right? And so that could make sense why it could help if you're not methylating enough. There was one case study that somebody with the MTHFR variant supplemented with creatine and they reduced their homocysteine. Now, that's not a clinical trial. Selenium is something that you don't want too high levels or too low levels. And so you want that in a balanced range. If it's too high or too low, it could be problematic for methylation. And then relaxation techniques. Same thing goes hand in hand with yoga. Psychological stress temporarily increases homocysteine levels, which return to normal after stress resolves. So if you're constantly under stress, your homocysteine may remain high. For me, again, psychological stress wasn't the issue that was raising my homocysteine. It was mainly the increased working out. And over time, for the past year and a half, I'd say there's a trend towards increasing exercise overall, increasing activity. And even though I was increasing my methyl groups at the same time, I was still not meeting that demand to get into the optimal homocysteine range. And last, there's various toxins that can be a burden to methylation. One of them is BPA, so it can inhibit methylation enzymes. There's other toxins that technically could do. We discussed mercury and cadmium, but essentially, I think a lot of toxins could probably create more need for methyl groups. Toxins increase the body's methylation demand since methylation eliminates them. Methylation also creates the antioxidant glutathione, which you need more of to neutralize BPA and other toxins. And so that is the summary of how to go about increasing your methylation and how to find out if you're under So methylation is important for a bunch of processes in the body, including neurotransmitters, mood through dopamine and serotonin. So firsthand, if I'm not methylating enough, my mood takes a dive. And so I need to make sure that I'm getting enough methyl groups. And you're not going to detox as well if you're under methylating. And there's some people that talk about over methylation. I tend to not see that as a problem. You don't see, for example, people's homocysteine as being low generally. I haven't, it happens, but it's very rare. Over methylation is usually not a problem. In my case, I think it could be a problem, for example, if you are taking a lot of methyl groups and you're not exercising. So then that could technically be a problem. I find that I get a little more agitated if I take a lot of methyl groups and then I don't exercise. You want some kind of balance. But again, generally, if you're just living a generally healthy lifestyle, I don't see overmethylation as a problem. If you're sedentary and you're naturally higher in methylation and you're taking certain supplements that could increase methylation, then that could be potentially an issue. But for me, I find that, like I said, I might get slightly more irritable if I'm not exercising and I'm taking a lot of methyl groups. But otherwise, what you generally see is I don't think there's very much research on overmethylation. I haven't seen it. I don't see which tests would indicate it. I don't see people having low homocysteine generally. So I'm assuming it can occur, but of course, but I think it's pretty rare. And I think really what people need to worry about is lower methylation. So go on over to Self Decode, look at your methylation results. We look at 30 genetic variants, which is the most comprehensive on the market. We put all the research together and we have the most comprehensive report with the best recommendations, all the references there. And you could look at your next steps, upload labs, and you could see more reports as well. There's a homocysteine report, there's a PEMT report, an MTHFR report, a methionine report, and a MTHFD1, a folate report, and other methylation related reports, including for vitamins, choline, B12. And something interesting you could see here is that I have a genetic predisposition to higher homocysteine and then lower PEMT, lower MTHFR, increased need for methionine, lower MTHFD1, increased need for folate. And so you could see why I have different methylation problems. But essentially, the genetics is a good starting place where you could see your genetic predisposition. You can upload your lab tests and you can look at other information. When you go to the next steps, it tells you which lab tests to take. And You can see currently there's 5 different lab tests, but and you upload them and they tell you what's in or not in the optimal range. And so for these, for example, the ones that are not in the optimal range, working on fixing them, that includes methionine, homocysteine, and B12 is just higher, in which case, like I said, I maxed out my B12 that I can take, and that was with 500 micrograms a day. So, hope you like this podcast. If you do, please click subscribe, share, leave a review, and if you want me to do more of these, I will. There's a lot of topics I can go through, and it's really you really want to look at your health in a precision health way. You don't want to be guessing. There's a lot of information and there's a lot of misinformation out there. I feel like my job is to really explain to people how to get the proper results. When you do things right, you get the proper results. I found that using my method of testing, getting good information, understanding my genetic predispositions has enabled me to do a lot of things. And so because I have really access to really good data with self-decode, I'm able to use these, make very smart decisions, use the software, make very smart decisions. 67% of listeners aren't subscribed to the show, so please don't forget to show your support by hitting the subscribe button now. You'll not only be supporting the show, but also investing in yourself and your health journey, all while helping to keep us ad-free.